This video is now in session, and looking at the shifts between 2016 and 2020, we can start to figure out what a kind of like a 2024 map would look like, presidentially speaking. So, this is the 2020 election, but it's, instead of like having the counties shaded red or blue, instead what it is a diagram of the shift between 2016 and 2020 in terms of voter turnout and as well as the shift between Republican and Democrat. So this is the presidential election of Joe Biden, and you can see that there are a lot of blue places, but there are also places that are red, like the southern area of Texas, Rio Grande, or Florida in Miami-Dade County, or in Los Angeles County in California, or even near the Bay Area. In the key states of Arizona, though, as well as Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, there were enough shifts to the left to the point where Joe Biden could win all 5 of those states. And other states and competitive districts include Nebraska's 2nd district, where you can see the shifted blue there, and then probably most notably in the shift, Colorado has shifted very, very far to the left in comparison to 2016, where it was won by lean margins by Hillary Clinton. So, if we examine this further, we can see the shift from 2012 to 2016 and then compare that to 2020. As you can see, the shift to 2012 to 2016 was a lot more red than 2016 to 2020 was blue. You can see that there are a lot of red arrows going very far to the right, but here for 2020, it's not as much. And that just shows America is getting more competitive and more divided between Republicans and Democrats. This kind of shift does not happen a whole lot of times. And it's more likely that this kind of shift will continue to happen in the future. Going even further, we can look at the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt here, Michigan. We saw that a lot of the suburban areas in Michigan, as well as Wayne County and Detroit, moved sharply to the left because of voter turnout. There was high voter turnouts in the Detroit area, which let Democrats win Michigan. And then you also have suburbs in Grand Rapids and as well as other areas that were shifted a little more to the left to then secure that win for Joe Biden. Meanwhile, there were a few shifts to the right, but it was very narrow. Ultimately, every county shift here is pretty narrow, with the exception of Wayne County, where it's going a little more to the left. That said, this is much less than the shift that happened in 2016. You can see that it shifted very far to the right, and that's most likely what's going to happen in the future. Donald Trump was just viewed as way too bombastic and way too conservative for a lot of people, and thus he lost the 2020 re-election bid. In Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, these states also had flips to Democrats, but they were all pretty narrow. You can see that it's going up a little bit to the left, not far to the left like it is for maybe like Indiana, but it's mainly going tilting towards the left. And that's how Joe Biden was only able to win Wisconsin by tilt margin and Pennsylvania by lean margin. Now, this is not sustainable for Democrats in the long term. If they keep relying on the Rust Belt, it's going to get harder for them to win those states, mainly because they're shifting, it's trending more towards the right overall. It's become more right as the electoral vote presence in these 3 states lessen. Michigan and Pennsylvania are expected to lose 1 electoral vote, and then in this region overall, Minnesota and Ohio and West Virginia, they're all losing an electoral vote between 2020 and 2024. And speaking of these other states, let's go through them quickly. For Ohio, we saw that ultimately there was no shift in Ohio. That was because even though there was a shift to the left in the Cincinnati suburbs and the Columbus suburbs, that was outpaced by the shift to the right by a lot of the Ohio rural counties, and ultimately Ohio is expected to be Republican. Now, Democrats are probably not going to give up on Ohio just yet, mainly because it's a lot of electoral votes at stake. That said, in the future, it doesn't seem like Ohio will have as big of a presence as it usually does in electoral politics. The more important states, I guess, would be Michigan and Pennsylvania. The same thing applies to Iowa as in Ohio. And then for Illinois, we see that there wasn't too much of a shift. There wasn't too much of a shift overall, and that's indicative of most urban states, New York and California included, where there were a lot of urban voters who did not shift too much to the left, and some shifted a little bit to the right. And that's because Joe Biden was just not a very influential candidate for a lot of these people, like Hillary Clinton was or Barack Obama. Both of those individuals are much more charismatic than Joe Biden, and thus a lot of urban voters voted for them in 2008, 2012, and as well as 2016. And then finally, the final state is Minnesota. We saw Minnesota go back to its left lean-in history, where in 2016 it was pretty competitive. You can see, where's the map? Right here, where a lot of places shifted to the right in Minnesota, but a lot of these places shifted back to the left in 2020, and we can expect Minnesota to keep going blue for some time to come. Now, down to the south, we have Georgia. Georgia, this is where a lot of Democratic voters turned out for the 2020 election and flipped Georgia blue, due to voter turnout efforts by individuals in the Georgia Democratic Party. This combined with the ineptitude of the Georgia Republican Party in that they did not see this coming, and you can realize why Georgia went to the left. And in the future, it's gonna keep going to the left. At this point, the fate is sealed for Georgian Republicans because they need a really good candidate to come back in 2022. And at this current moment, they're fighting with each other as to between the moderates, not moderates, but I guess the institutionalists like Brad Raffensperger and other individuals like Doug Collins. So Georgia, it's just gonna go to the left at this point, and it's gonna keep going to the left as the main people who are migrating over to Georgia are coming from Democratic counties and urban areas over to the Atlanta metro area. This, combined with the suburban vote in Georgia going to Democrats, and you can realize that Georgia will stay blue. And looking more around at this area, we see that South Carolina and Florida have also shifted. South Carolina has shifted blue with a lot of these a lot of the suburbs in South Carolina and Charleston as well as Columbus shifting to the left. And this shows that Democrats in the South are starting to gain in terms of they're starting to gain in terms of their presence, and in the future there is a possibility where Democrats could flip a lot of these southern states back to them. Now, obviously, this is going decades out into the future, and a lot can change within decades, but that's something to note for Democrats in that they can try to get this area of the southern states because there are a lot of black voters coming back from the Northeast over to the South after the Great Migration that happened after slavery ended. So that's the South. We also have to talk about Florida and North Carolina, though. North Carolina, there were a lot of places that shifted blue. That said, there were also a lot of places that voted more Republican, and that counteracted the win that Joe Biden was supposedly going to have in North Carolina. In Florida, this shows that the Democratic Party just keeps getting finessed by Florida Republicans, and at this point, Florida has shifted to the right. Ever since 2008, every single presidential election shifted to the right. So Democrats really need to rethink their strategy in Florida. Obviously, what they're doing right now is not correct, and especially in the Miami-Dade County, where there are a lot of voters who voted for Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden, there definitely needs to be reflections by the Democrats just like there has to be a reflection by Republicans in Georgia. In Texas and Arizona, we see that for Texas, there was a huge shift for Democrats in the urban and suburban areas of Texas, mainly Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, as well as Harris County, and I'm saying Harris County because it doesn't include just Houston. So those are the shifts that help put Biden to 5.5%. That said, if the Democrats would have been in a much better position had they also been able to shift many of the voters along the Rio Grande Valley. And the Rio Grande Valley there's a lot of Latinos in the Rio Grande Valley, and many of them shifted from Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump. And this is a problem for Democrats because a lot of these voters, even though Democrats care about social issues, a lot of these voters care about economical issues. They want to be wealthy, and they want to, and they care more about economics rather than social change. Now, obviously, this does not apply to everyone along the Rio Grande Valley, but it's indicative of that based on what a lot of people have said along the valley. For Arizona, this is also like Georgia, another state where it's getting incredibly hard for Republicans to shift back to them in 2024. The reason why is because both of these parties are botching horribly. Both of these parties are like the Democratic Party in Florida. They're just messing up time and time again, and they're going in the wrong direction. That said, unlike the Florida Democratic primary, it's easy for Georgia and Arizona for these Republican parties to reverse course. It's not easy for the Democratic Party in Florida to reverse course, mainly because their problem is complex, and Florida is very, very diverse. So there are layers upon layers of issues that the Democrats have faced in Florida that they have to rectify. In Arizona, this is something where if Republicans go more moderate, they would definitely be able to win. People like Doug Ducey, Jeff Flake, and as well as John McCain. That said, they're going more to the right with Representative Paul Gosar potentially running in 2022 against Mark Kelly in the U.S. Senate, as well as other hard right Republicans, and it's not the right direction for Republicans, and that could ultimately seal the fate for Republicans in that state. So what does this mean for the future electoral map? Well, we can expect to see that Arizona and as well as Georgia, in addition to North Carolina, shift a lot more to the blue. And then Texas is a potential for Democrats if they don't screw it up like Florida, where they could actually win Texas in 2024. And then Florida, this is where Democrats have to work incredibly hard because they're going to need all the 4 years to 2024 in order to reverse their wrongdoings from 2016 and as well as 2020. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.